stood in the corner of our family's spacious living room, clutching my glass of champagne like a lifeline. The buzz of excited chatter filled the air, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter. At the center of it all, basking in the adoration of our parents and extended family, stood my brother Quentin. To Quentin, my father's booming voice rose above the din, the youngest CEO in the history of Morrison Enterprises. We always knew you'd make us proud, son. The room erupted in applause. I forced a smile and raised my glass along with everyone else, ignoring the familiar ache in my chest. As I watched my mother embrace Quentin, her eyes shining with tears of joy, I couldn't help but wonder if she'd ever looked at me that way. "Speech! Speech!" someone called out, and Quentin stepped forward, his $1,000,000 smile on full display. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "This is a dream come true, and I couldn't have done it without the unwavering support of my family, especially Mom and Dad." As Quentin continued to speak, my mind drifted to the day I'd received my Ph.D. in psychology. There had been no party, no champagne. Just a quick, "Congratulations, honey," from Mom, and a distracted nod from Dad before they returned to discussing Quentin's latest business venture. I was pulled back to the present by the sound of my name. And of course, I have to thank my brilliant, big sister Zella, Quentin said, flashing me a grin. Without her setting the academic bar so high, I might never have been motivated to prove myself in the business world. A few chuckles rippled through the room, and I felt my cheeks burn. Was that supposed to be a compliment? Or just another reminder that in our family, academic achievements paled in comparison to financial success? As the party continued around, I slipped away to the kitchen, needing a moment to collect myself. I leaned against the cool marble countertop, closing my eyes and taking deep breaths. "You okay, sweetie?" I opened my eyes to see Aunt Sarah standing in the doorway, concern etched on her face. Of all our relatives, she was the only one who seemed to truly see me. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just needed a little break from all the excitement." Aunt Sarah moved closer, her voice lowering. "It's okay to feel overshadowed sometimes, Zella. Your accomplishments are just as important as Quentin's, even if your parents don't always show it." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "Thanks, Aunt Sarah. I wish they could be proud of me too, you know?" She squeezed my arm gently. "They are proud of you, sweetie. They just have a funny way of showing it sometimes. Give them time. They'll come around." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As Aunt Sarah left to rejoin the party, I turned to face the window, staring out at the manicured lawn bathed in moonlight. I loved my brother. I really did. But standing there in the quiet kitchen, listening to the muffled sounds of celebration, I made a silent vow to myself. No more living in Quentin's shadow. No more settling for scraps of attention and validation. It was time for Zella Morrison to step into the light and demand the recognition she deserved. Little did I know that my chance would come sooner than I ever expected, and in a way that would shake our family to its very core. The next morning, I woke to the insistent buzzing of my phone. Groggily, I reached for it, squinting at the screen. 12 missed calls from Mom, 8 from Dad, and a flurry of text messages. My heart raced as I sat up, suddenly wide awake. What could have happened? I called Mom back immediately, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. When she answered, her voice was tight with tension. "Zella, thank God. Have you seen the news?" "No, I just woke up. What's going on?" It's Quentin. There's been some kind of financial scandal. The police are involved. Your father's trying to get more information, but it's all over the media already. We need you to come over right away." My mind reeled as I tried to process her words. Quentin? A scandal? It didn't make sense. My perfect golden boy brother, the pride of the Morrison family, in trouble with the law? I'll be there in 20 minutes, I promised, already scrambling out of bed. As I drove to my parents' house, I flipped on the radio. The news was everywhere. Breaking news. Quentin Morrison, CEO of Morrison Enterprises, is under investigation for alleged fraud and embezzlement. Sources close to the investigation claim that millions of dollars are unaccounted for. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. For years, I'd resented Quentin's success, wishing for just a fraction of the recognition he received. Now, in the blink of an eye, it was all crumbling around him. But as I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, seeing my mother's tear-stained face at the window, another emotion took hold. Determination. This wasn't just about Quentin anymore. This was about our entire family and the web of expectations and favoritism that had shaped us all. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. As I stepped out of the car, I knew that this crisis would either tear us apart or force us to confront the harsh truths we'd been avoiding for far too long. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Mom sat on the couch, clutching a crumpled tissue, while Dad paced back and forth, his phone pressed to his ear. They both looked up when I entered, relief washing over their faces. "Zella, thank goodness you're here," Mom said, reaching out to me. I hesitated for a moment before sitting beside her, allowing her to grasp my hand. Dad ended his call with a frustrated grunt. "The lawyers aren't saying much, just that we need to prepare for a long legal battle." "Where's Quentin?" I asked, noticing his absence. He's turned himself in," Mom choked out, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Oh, Zella, how could this happen? Our boy." I felt a twinge of the old familiar resentment. Even now, with Quentin facing serious criminal charges, he was still our boy in their eyes. I pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the matter at hand. "What exactly is he being accused of?" I asked, turning to Dad. He sank into an armchair, suddenly looking every bit his 65 years. "From what we can gather, he's been cooking the books for years, inflating profits, hiding losses. When some investors started asking questions, he panicked, tried to cover it up by embezzling funds." The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in. I thought back to all those lavish parties, the expensive gifts, the constant praise heaped upon Quentin. Had it all been built on lies? "What can I do to help?" I asked, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. Mom looked at me gratefully. "Just you being here means so much, sweetheart. We're going to need to stick together as a family now, more than ever, as a family." The words echoed in my mind, stirring up a mix of emotions. For years, I'd felt like an outsider in my own family, my achievements overlooked in favor of Quentin's flashier success. Now, in the face of this crisis, they were turning to me for support. I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to say could change everything. "I'll help," I said slowly, "but on one condition." My parents exchanged a confused glance. "What do you mean, Zella?" Dad asked. I stood up, feeling a surge of confidence I'd never experienced before. "I want us to have a family reunion. Not just us, but the extended family too. And at this reunion, I want you both to publicly acknowledge the favoritism you've shown Quentin all these years and how you've overlooked my accomplishments." The stunned silence that followed was deafening. Mom's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, while Dad's face flushed red. "Zella, is this really the time?" he began, but I cut him off. "Yes, it is. For years, I've watched you shower Quentin with praise and attention while barely acknowledging my own successes. My Ph.D? Barely a footnote. My research publications? Not even mentioned at family gatherings. If we're going to face this crisis as a family, We need to address the cracks in our foundation first. Mom's voice was small when she finally spoke. We didn't realize you felt that way, sweetheart. We've always been proud of you. Have you? I challenged, years of pent-up frustration bubbling to the surface. Because from where I'm standing, it's always been the Quentin show. And look where that's gotten us. Dad stood up abruptly. Now listen here, young lady. No, you listen, I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. I'm not doing this out of spite or jealousy. I'm doing this because our family needs healing, and it starts with honesty. We need to confront the dynamics that led us here. Only then can we truly support each other through what's coming. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words and long-buried emotions. I could see the conflict in my parents' eyes, the instinct to defend themselves warring with the dawning realization that I might have a point. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice gruff, but no longer angry. A family reunion, you say? I nodded, heart pounding. Yes, in 2 weeks. Enough time to gather everyone, but soon enough to address this before the media circus gets even worse. Mom wiped her eyes, looking between Dad and me. Maybe Zella's right, Robert. We've always prided ourselves on being a close-knit family. If there are issues we've been blind to, perhaps it's time we face them. Dad was quiet for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. All right, we'll do it your way, Zella. But I hope you understand what you're asking of us. I do, I said softly. And I hope you understand what I've been asking for all these years. As I left my parents' house that day, I felt a mix of emotions swirling within me. Fear for what the future held for our family in light of Quentin's actions. Anxiety about the confrontation to come at the reunion. But underneath it all, a glimmer of hope. For the first time in years, I felt seen, heard, and I was determined to make the most of this opportunity, not just for myself, but for the healing of our entire family. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. I threw myself into organizing the family reunion, partly to keep my mind off the constant stream of news about Quentin's case, and partly because I wanted everything to be perfect for the moment of truth that was coming. As I made calls to aunts, uncles, and cousins, I was struck by the range of reactions to our family's sudden fall from grace. Some were sympathetic, offering words of support and promises to stand by us. Others were more hesitant, clearly worried about how associating with us might affect their own reputations. And a few, I suspected, were secretly relishing the downfall of the mighty Morrisons. Through it all, I couldn't help but notice a shift in my parents' behavior towards me. There were more phone calls, more questions about my opinion on various matters. It was as if they were seeing me in a new light, recognizing the strength and capability that had always been there, hidden in Quentin's shadow. The night before, the reunion, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, rehearsing what I wanted to say. The words had been swimming in my head for days, a jumble of hurt, anger, and hope for reconciliation. As I met my own gaze in the reflection, I made a promise to myself. No matter what happened tomorrow, I would speak my truth. It was time for Zella Morrison to step into the spotlight. The morning of the reunion dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself was setting the stage for our family's reckoning. I arrived at the rented event space early, my stomach in knots as I oversaw the final preparations. As family members began to trickle in, I could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Aunt Sarah was one of the first to arrive, enveloping me in a warm hug. "I'm proud of you for doing this, Zella," she whispered. "It's long overdue." I clung to her words like a lifeline as I greeted the rest of the family, fielding awkward questions about Quentin and deflecting not-so-subtle digs about the family's tarnished reputation. Through it all, I kept my eyes on the door, waiting for my parents to arrive. When they finally walked in, I felt my breath catch in my throat. They looked older somehow, the weight of recent events etched on their faces. But as they approached me, I saw something else in their eyes. Determination. And maybe, just maybe, a hint of remorse. "Are you ready for this?" I asked quietly as they reached me. Dad squeezed my shoulder, his voice gruff with emotion. "As ready as we'll ever be, sweetheart." As the last of the family members arrived and everyone settled into their seats, I took my place at the front of the room. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it, but I forced myself to stand tall, channeling all the strength and resilience I'd built up over the years. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice surprisingly steady. "I know, these past few weeks have been difficult for our family, and I appreciate you being here today." I paused, taking in the sea of familiar faces before me. Some looked curious, others wary, but all were listening intently. "We're here today, not just because of recent events, but because of long-standing issues within our family that need to be addressed. For years, there has been an imbalance in how achievements and attention have been distributed among the Morrison children. And while recent revelations about Quentin have brought this to the forefront, it's a problem that has been simmering for far too long." A murmur went through the crowd, and I saw a few pointed looks directed at my parents. I took a deep breath and continued. "I've asked my parents to speak today, to publicly acknowledge this favoritism and its impact, not to shame them, but so that we can begin to heal as a family and move forward together." I turned to my parents, who were sitting in the front row. "Mom, Dad, would you please come up here?" As they made their way to the front, I could see the conflict in their eyes. This wasn't easy for them, I knew, but it was necessary. Dad cleared his throat, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant as he began to speak. Your mother and I owe you an apology, Zella. Not just you, but everyone here. We've always prided ourselves on being fair, on valuing all our children equally. But looking back, we can see that our actions haven't always reflected that." Mom stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes. "We got caught up in the excitement of Quentin's business success. It was flashy, easy to brag about at dinner parties. But in doing so, we overlooked the quiet, steady achievements of our daughter. Zella, your Ph.D., your research, the lives you've touched through your work, they're every bit as valuable and worthy of celebration." I felt a lump forming in my throat as Dad continued. "We've always been proud of you, Zella, but we didn't show it the way we should have. We let our own biases and society's measures of success cloud our judgment. And in doing so, we not only hurt you, but we set a dangerous precedent that may have contributed to recent events." The room was silent, the weight of their words hanging in the air. I could see shock, understanding, and even a few tears on the faces of our extended family. "We can't change the past," Mom said, her voice gaining strength. "But we can acknowledge our mistakes and commit to doing better, to valuing all forms of success and achievement equally, to supporting each other through both triumphs and trials." As they finished speaking, I felt tears streaming down my own cheeks. Years of pent-up emotion were flooding out, a mix of pain, relief, and cautious hope for the future. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. This means more than you know." And then, something unexpected happened. Aunt Sarah stood up, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "I think I speak for all of us when I say that it's about time this was addressed. Zella, we've all seen your struggles and your triumphs over the years. You are an incredible woman, and we are all proud to call you family." A murmur of agreement swept through the room, and suddenly, I was enveloped in a wave of support. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years came up to share stories of how my academic achievements had inspired them. Uncles and aunts apologized for not recognizing my accomplishments sooner. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. As the initial intensity of emotions began to settle, the conversation naturally turned to Quentin and the challenges our family was facing. But now, there was a different tone to the discussion. Instead of hushed whispers and pointed accusations, there was a sense of unity, of a family coming together to face a crisis. Uncle Jack, always the practical one, spoke up. We need to talk about how we're going to support Quentin through this legal battle while also holding him accountable for his actions. Aunt Sarah nodded in agreement. And we need to consider the impact on the family business. There are employees and their families to think about. As the discussion continued, I found myself actively participating, offering insights from my psychology background on how we might approach Quentin's rehabilitation and the family's healing process. For the first time, I felt truly valued for my expertise, my opinions sought after and respected. Hours passed, and as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the windows, I looked around the room at my family. There were tear-stained cheeks and tired eyes, but also small smiles and clasped hands. We had taken the first step on a long journey of healing and reconciliation. As people began to leave, offering hugs and words of support, my parents approached me. Dad's eyes were red-rimmed, and Mom's hand trembled slightly as she reached for mine. "Zella," Dad began, his voice gruff with emotion. "We can't change the past, but I want you to know how incredibly proud we are of you, not just for your achievements, but for your strength in bringing us all together today. You've shown us what true leadership looks like." Mom pulled me into a tight embrace. "We love you so much, sweetheart. Can you forgive us for not showing it the way we should have all these years?" I felt tears welling up again as I hugged them both. "I love you too," I whispered. "And yes, I forgive you. We're going to get through this together." As I drove home that evening, exhausted but filled with a sense of cautious optimism, I reflected on the day's events. It hadn't been easy, and I knew there would be many more challenges ahead as we navigated Quentin's legal troubles and worked to rebuild trust within our family. But for the first time in years, I felt truly seen and valued for who I was. I thought about all the other people out there who might be struggling with similar family dynamics, feeling overshadowed, undervalued, or simply lost in the expectations of others. I made a silent vow to use my experiences and my professional skills to help others find their voice and their place within their families. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a text message from Aunt Sarah. "You did good today, kiddo. Your mom called me after she got home. I think you've sparked some real change. Keep shining your light." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it. Because now, finally, I knew my worth, and I was determined to help my family, all of us, including Quentin, find a new way forward, one where every member's unique strengths and contributions were recognized and celebrated. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity as our family grappled with the fallout from Quentin's actions and worked to implement the changes we had discussed at the reunion. I found myself thrust into a new role, acting as a bridge between different factions of the family and using my psychology background to help navigate the complex emotions at play. Quentin's legal troubles were far from over, but with the family's support, he had agreed to plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for his cooperation in untangling the web of financial deceit. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it offered a path forward that didn't involve years of costly and public legal battles. As for me, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. The experiences with my family had given me a new perspective on the importance of validation and recognition in personal growth. I began developing a new research project focused on the long-term effects of familial favoritism on adult siblings, hoping to shed light on a topic that I now realized affected far more people than I had initially thought. One crisp autumn afternoon, about 6 months after the family reunion, I received an unexpected call from Dad. "Zella," he said, his voice serious but warm. "I need your help with something important." Intrigued, I agreed to meet him at his office the next day. When I arrived, I was surprised to find not just Dad, but Mom and several key members of the Morrison Enterprises Board of Directors waiting for me. Dad stood as I entered, a mixture of pride and nervousness on his face. "Zella, we've been doing a lot of thinking about the future of the company in light of recent events. We need to rebuild trust, both within the family and with our employees and clients." I nodded, still unsure where this was going. "We've decided," he continued, "that the best way forward is to bring in new leadership. Someone with a fresh perspective, strong ethical grounding, and the ability to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics." My heart began to race as I realized what he was implying. "Zella," Mom said, stepping forward, "we'd like to offer you the position of CEO of Morrison Enterprises." For a moment, I was speechless. Me? CEO? It was so far from anything I had ever imagined for myself that I almost laughed out loud. But as I looked around the room, seeing the earnest expressions on everyone's faces, I felt a shift within myself. This wasn't about stepping into Quentin's shoes or fulfilling some long-held family expectation. This was an opportunity to use my unique skills and perspectives to help heal and transform not just our family, but an entire organization. I'm honored, I finally managed to say. But I'm not a businesswoman. My background is in psychology. Dad smiled, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. "That's exactly why we want you, Zella. We don't need another financial whiz or market strategist. We need someone who understands people, who can rebuild the culture of this company from the ground up." Over the next few hours, we talked through the details. It would be a challenging role, requiring me to step far outside my comfort zone and learn an entirely new set of skills. But as we discussed the possibilities, implementing new ethical guidelines, creating mentorship programs, fostering a culture of open communication and mutual support, I felt a growing sense of excitement. By the time I left the office that evening, I had provisionally accepted the position, pending a formal vote by the board. As I drove home, my mind was spinning with ideas and possibilities. I thought about how far we'd come as a family in just a few short months, and how much further we still had to go. I thought about Quentin, who was now in a rehabilitation program, working to understand the root causes of his actions and make amends. I thought about my parents, who were learning to see success in new and broader terms. And I thought about myself, the overlooked daughter who had found her voice and was now being asked to lead. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a package on my doorstep. Inside was a framed photo from the family reunion, showing all of us together. Not the polished, perfect image we used to project, but a real, raw moment of connection. Along with it was a note from Aunt Sarah. "Zella, I heard the big news. Remember? This moment. It's where it all began. You've already changed our family for the better. Now go change the world. We're all rooting for you." I clutched the frame to my chest, feeling a swell of emotion. The road ahead would be challenging, no doubt. There would be skeptics to win over, hard decisions to make, and undoubtedly moments of self-doubt. But I was ready, because now I understood that true success wasn't about accolades or financial achievements. It was about using your unique gifts to make a positive impact on the world around you. It was about having the courage to speak your truth and the wisdom to listen when others speak theirs. It was about building connections, fostering growth, and creating a legacy of positive change. As I hung the photo on my wall, I made a silent promise to myself and to my family. We had been given a second chance, an opportunity to redefine what the Morrison name stood for, and I was determined to make the most of it. The next morning, I woke up early, filled with the sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. As I sipped my coffee and watched the sunrise, I began to outline my vision for the future of Morrison Enterprises. It would be a company that valued ethical behavior above all else, that invested in its employees' personal growth as much as their professional development, and that used its resources to make a positive impact on the community. I thought about all the people who might be facing similar struggles, feeling overshadowed, undervalued, or trapped in roles that didn't allow them to fully express their talents. I wanted Morrison Enterprises to be a beacon of hope for those people, a living example of how embracing diversity of thought and experience could lead to stronger, more resilient organizations. As I prepared to head into the office for my first official day as CEO, I paused in front of the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who had stood in this same spot months ago, rehearsing her speech for the family reunion. She stood taller, her eyes bright with purpose and confidence. "You've got this, Zella," I told my reflection. "Time to show the world what you're made of." And with that, I stepped out into the bright morning sun, ready to write the next chapter of the Morrison family story. A chapter of redemption, growth, and the power of embracing our true selves. As I walked into the Morrison Enterprises headquarters, I was struck by the mix of emotions on the faces of the employees. There was curiosity, hope, and more than a little apprehension. I couldn't blame them. After the turmoil of the past months, change was both necessary and frightening. My first act as CEO was to call an all-hands meeting. Standing on the stage in the company auditorium, facing hundreds of expectant faces, I took a deep breath and began to speak. "Good morning, everyone. As you know, I'm Zella Morrison, and as of today, I'm your new CEO. I know many of you are wondering why I'm here, what qualifies me for this role, and what it means for the future of this company. Those are all valid questions, and I'm going to do my best to answer them." I went on to share my background, not glossing over my lack of traditional business experience, but emphasizing how my training in psychology and my personal experiences had prepared me for this moment. "I'm not here to run this company the way it's always been run," I continued. "I'm here because we need a fundamental shift in how we operate, how we treat each other, and how we measure success. We're going to prioritize ethical behavior, employee well-being, and positive community impact alongside financial performance. It won't be easy, and there will be challenges along the way, but I believe that together, we can build something truly extraordinary." As I spoke, I could feel the energy in the room shifting. The apprehension was still there, but it was now tinged with curiosity and a cautious optimism. When I opened the floor for questions, hands shot up all around the room. For the next hour, I answered questions honestly and directly, not shying away from the difficult topics. Yes, there would be changes. No, I couldn't guarantee that everyone's job would look the same in a year's time. But I could promise transparency, fairness, and a commitment to helping every employee find their place in the new Morrison Enterprises. As the meeting wrapped up, an older employee approached me. "Ms. Morrison," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "I've been with this company for 30 years. I've seen a lot of changes, good and bad, but I've never seen anything like this. I don't know if it'll work, but I'm willing to give it a shot." His words stayed with me as I dove into the work of reshaping the company. There were long days and sleepless nights, difficult conversations and tough decisions. But with each passing week, I could see small signs of change taking root. We implemented new ethical guidelines and created an anonymous reporting system for any concerns. We launched a mentorship program, pairing senior employees with junior staff across departments to foster learning and break down silos. We revamped our community outreach efforts, encouraging employees to volunteer and matching their charitable donations. And slowly but surely, the culture began to shift. I started to hear stories of employees feeling more engaged, more valued. Client feedback improved as they sensed a new level of integrity in our dealings. We even started attracting talent from competitors, drawn by our reputation as a company that cared about more than just the bottom line. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. There were setbacks and moments of doubt. But each time I faced a challenge, I thought back to that family reunion, to the moment when I had found the courage to speak my truth, and I drew strength from the knowledge that I was no longer alone in this journey. As the 1-year anniversary of my taking the helm at Morrison Enterprises approached, I received an invitation from a prestigious business school. They wanted me to give a guest lecture on ethical leadership and organizational change. Standing at the podium, looking out at a sea of eager young faces, I felt a surge of emotion. These were the leaders of tomorrow, and I had the opportunity to shape their understanding of what true success could look like. Your worth is not determined by your title, your salary, or the size of your office, I told them. It's determined by the positive impact you have on the people around you. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room or making the most money. It's about creating an environment where everyone can thrive, where diverse perspectives are valued, and where ethical behavior is non-negotiable. As I spoke, I could see heads nodding, pens scribbling furiously. And I realized that my journey, from overlooked daughter to reluctant CEO to passionate advocate for a new kind of business leadership, had a purpose beyond just my own growth or my family's healing. It was about changing the narrative, about showing that success and integrity could go hand in hand, about proving that when we embrace our authentic selves and use our unique gifts, we have the power to transform not just our own lives, but the lives of those around us. As I wrapped up my lecture, a young woman in the front row raised her hand. "Ms. Morrison," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've always felt like I didn't fit the mold of what a business leader should be. But listening to you today, for the first time, I feel like maybe that's okay. Maybe my differences could actually be an asset." Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning, taking me back to all those years I'd spent feeling out of place in my own family. I smiled at her, feeling a deep sense of connection. "It's more than okay," I assured her. "The world doesn't need more leaders who fit a predetermined mold. It needs leaders who bring their whole, authentic selves to the table. Your unique perspective, your challenges, your triumphs, they all shape who you are as a leader. Embrace that." As the lecture hall emptied, I found myself surrounded by students, eager to share their own stories and ask for advice. I stayed for hours, listening and offering what guidance I could. It was exhausting, but exhilarating. I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. That night, as I lay in my hotel room reflecting on the day, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Saw a clip of your lecture online. Your father and I are so proud of you, Zella. You're changing lives." I felt a lump form in my throat as I read her words. It wasn't that long ago that I'd been desperate for any scrap of recognition from my parents. Now, their pride in me felt like a warm blanket, comforting but no longer necessary for my sense of self-worth. The next morning, as I prepared to head back home, I received an email from the dean of the business school. They wanted to know if I'd be interested in developing a full course on ethical leadership and organizational psychology. It was an exciting opportunity, a chance to shape the next generation of business leaders on a larger scale. As I considered the offer on the flight home, I thought about how far I'd come, from the overlooked sister to a respected CEO, and now a potential educator. Each step of the journey had been challenging, but each had also brought me closer to understanding my true purpose. I realized that my story, the story of finding my voice, of challenging the status quo, of redefining success, had the power to inspire others to do the same. Whether in the boardroom or the classroom, I had the opportunity to help others recognize and embrace their unique gifts. As the plane touched down, I made my decision. I would accept the offer to teach, balancing it with my role at Morrison Enterprises. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for the challenge. Because now I understood that true fulfillment comes not from meeting others' expectations, but from living authentically and using our gifts to lift others up. Stepping off the plane, I felt a sense of excitement for what the future held. The journey of self-discovery and transformation. I had begun at that family reunion was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning, and I was ready to embrace every step of it, knowing that each challenge and triumph would not only shape me, but would also ripple out to touch the lives of others. As I walked through the airport, I caught sight of my reflection in a window. The woman looking back at me stood tall, confident, her eyes bright with purpose. She was a far cry from the insecure, overlooked Zella of the past. This Zella knew her worth, embraced her uniqueness, and was ready to change the world. One person at a time. I smiled at my reflection, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for every experience that had brought me to this moment. The pain of being overlooked, the courage it took to speak up, the challenges of taking on a role I never expected, all of it had shaped me into the person I was today. As I stepped out into the bright sunlight, I took a deep breath, feeling the excitement of possibilities stretching out before me. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges came my way, I would face them with authenticity, compassion, and the unwavering belief that every voice deserves to be heard. And as I hailed a taxi to take me home, I made a silent promise to myself and to all those I would encounter in my journey ahead. I would continue to use my story, my experiences, and my platform to inspire others to find their own voices, to challenge the narratives that hold them back, and to redefine success on their own terms. Because in the end, that's what true leadership is all about. Not just climbing to the top yourself, but reaching back to help others rise alongside you. And in that moment, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter. Not just for me, but for all those whose lives I would touch along the way. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead might be challenging, but I was ready to learn, to grow, to inspire, and to be inspired. Ready to continue rewriting the Morrison family legacy, one authentic step at a time. And as the city skyline came into view, I smiled. To myself, excited for whatever tomorrow might bring. Because now, I knew that with courage, authenticity, and a willingness to embrace our true selves, we all have the power to change our stories, and in doing so, to change the world.